In the name of Allah, rules of therapy from prophetic repetition. Zaytuna Cupping Center, Medina, Saudi Arabia. This meeting with the channel of rules of therapy from prophetic repetition aims to discuss a serious subject. Misbehavior towards Helicobacter pylori is leading to major spread of illness. Misbehavior towards Helicobacter pylori. Proper awareness of the natural physiology of H. pylori is the key to realize the risk of misbehavior towards Helicobacter pylori. While misbehavior towards H. pylori demonstrates how serious are the sequels of the abnormal behavior H. pylori strains, now what's the natural physiology of H. pylori? The organism H. pylori resides and colonizes just juxtamucosal under the gastric mucus layer. The gastric mucosa is used to tolerate this bacterium lying over the mucosa, not embedded within its folds. H. pylori colonized the stomach since an immemorial time, as if both the stomach wall and the bug used to live together in peace, harmless to each other. The gastric mucosa is the only structure in the body which can identify and recognize H. pylori, which is considered a foreign structure to all other tissues. H. pylori is a weak bacterium, extremely acid sensitive. It suffocates upon brief immersion in great dilutions of hydrochloric acid, HCl. Survival of H. pylori inside the stomach is achieved via various mechanisms. The alkaline gastric mucus is thick and viscous, allowing pH gradients from 2 inside the lumen to 7, which is neutral like water near the mucosa. The high motility of the organism via its flagellates allow it to move freely and jump away from any pool of acid in a blink, even in very viscid mucus. Urease activity of H. pylori produces ammonia from organic urea of residual gastric contents in justified adequate amounts that buffers any acidity reaching the immediate vicinity of the organism. The natural physiology of normal H. pylori strains inside the stomach does not include existence of the bacterium inside the lumen during presence of food, but it stays hiding in its shelter under the mucus layer while it picks up its nutrition from remnants of gastric contents after travel of the meal in a momentary blink, shielded by ammonia. The main routes of generation of energy for H. pylori for its metabolism, breathing, movement, and production of ammonia are via pyruvate and the splitting function of the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. Therefore, nutrition of H. pylori are mainly derived from pyruvate and organic urea. Then how could be the misbehavior towards Helicobacter pylori? Misbehavior towards H. pylori includes misbehavior in food habits, abuse of antibiotics, and the strategic antibiotic violence towards H. pylori. Misbehavior in food habits augments the gastric acid, while stomach fullness renders the mucus layer thinned up, allowing acidity to reach H. pylori and forcing it to get embedded within mucosal folds. Abuse of antibiotics and the antibiotic violence towards H. pylori forces H. pylori to migrate from the stomach to hide in an abnormal shelter. H. pylori in its new habitat is rendered a foreign structure to the tissues, and it becomes a source of poison, and it becomes a poison itself. Accordingly, what's the pathologic attitude of the abnormal H. pylori strains? The abnormal H. pylori strains are either abnormal behavior strains within the stomach or abnormal existence strains outside the stomach. The abnormal behavior strains of H. pylori inside the stomach develop due to misbehavior in food habits, leading to either existence of H. pylori within the lumen during presence of food, causing a vicious circle between the stomach acid and ammonia of H. pylori with consequent increased hyperacidity, or the increased acidity and thinning up of the alkaline mucus layer forces H. pylori to get embedded within the gastric mucosal fold. That's noisy to the gastric mucosa, as the stomach adapts to the bacterium just lying over it. The mucosa reacts by pushing the bacterium by lymphocytic infiltrate with consequent lymphocytic gastritis. Lymphocytic gastritis could lead to atrophic gastritis. Atrophic gastritis could complicate with gastric ulcers. Lymphocytic infiltrate could end up by gastric lymphoma, malt lymphoma, mucosa associated lymphoid tissue lymphoma. Gastric carcinoma could arise from edge of ulcers or transition of lymphoma. The abnormal existence strains of H. pylori outside the stomach develop due to abuse of antibiotics or the antibiotic violence towards H. pylori, leading to migration of H. pylori from the stomach to an abnormal shelter, mainly to the colon. H. pylori in its new habitat is a foreign structure to the tissues, leading to inflammatory reactions, local tissue pathology, and autoimmunity. H. pylori in the colon will continue producing ammonia for a purpose or no purpose, leading to accumulation of profuse toxic amounts of ammonia. Accumulation of profuse amounts of ammonia in the colon constitutes a biological toxic stress to the body. Ammonia is a smooth muscle tonic. Excess ammonia in the colon will induce multiple colonic, high sigmoid, and a high rectal spasm. The integral colonic function is then lost with development of colonic reabsorptive error and retention of fluids, salts, and toxins in the body. H. pylori is therefore rendering the colon one of the hidden reasons behind major illness in many people. All pathologic etiology related to H. pylori could be then clear: local tissue pathology, colonic reabsorptive error, inflammatory, toxic, biological stress, autoimmunity. So it's again evident that H. pylori is not pathologic by its own. It's forced to its pathologic attitude by misbehavior in food habits and abuse of antibiotics. And possibly the antibiotic violence towards Helicobacter pylori has rendered a domestic bug to become wild in attitude instead of getting rid of it. As the antibiotic resistant H. pylori strains are the main challenge that faces the H. pylori antibiotic eradication strategies. And as a great blame lies on these strategies of being behind development of the resistant H. pylori strains, some reports claim that these strains are pathologic by its own, virulent by its own, and antigenic by its own, not because of being immigrant foreign structures to the tissues consequent to the antibiotic violence. These reports demonstrated existence of the cytotoxin associated gene A positive H. pylori strains. They emphasized that this gene encodes high virulent antigenicity, and the presence of this virulent gene in the body could affect the clinical outcome in many patients. The answer is, where have these virulent genes and strains been before the H. pylori antibiotic eradication therapies? They answered that these strains were undiscovered. Well, where have been the dramatic spread of diabetes mellitus, the dramatic spread of hypertension, the dramatic spread of multiple sclerosis, and the dramatic spread of many autoimmune diseases before the triple antibiotic eradication therapies? And what's the reason of the dramatic spread of these H. pylori related diseases during the last 3 decades? The link of the published related research article, The World Misconception and Misbehavior towards Helicobacter pylori is leading to major spread of illness, is attached to the video. Then, for the next meeting with the channel of rules of therapy from prophetic repetition for discussion of the definitive management of the challenge of Helicobacter pylori. زيتونة Cupping Therapeutic Center, Medina, Saudi Arabia.